The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor where Sophia Winters stood frozen in her wedding dress. Her hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet of white roses, their petals beginning to wilt in the oppressive silence that had settled over the church. 300 guests sat in uncomfortable stillness, their whispered conversations creating a low hum of confusion and pity. Sophia felt their eyes burning into her back as she stared at the empty space where Victor Sterling should have been standing. The man who had promised to love her, to be a father to Emma, to give them the family they desperately needed. "Mama, where is Uncle Victor?" Emma's small voice cut through the tension like a blade. Her daughter stood beside her in a miniature pink dress, her dark eyes wide with the confusion that had become all too familiar since her father's death. Well, 2 years ago. Sophia's heart shattered into smaller pieces. How could she explain to her 5-year-old daughter that yet another man had walked out of their lives? How could she tell Emma that the man who had spent months earning her trust, who had taught her to ride a bike and read bedtime stories, had simply vanished without a word? Father Mackenzie cleared his throat nervously, his weathered hands fidgeting with his prayer book. The elderly priest had officiated hundreds of weddings in his 40 years of service, but he had never encountered a situation quite like this. "Perhaps we should," he began, his voice trailing off as he searched for words that might salvage some dignity from the situation. Wait, the voice came from the back of the cathedral, deep and commanding. Every head turned as a tall figure rose. From the third pew, his movement fluid and purposeful. Sophia had noticed him during her processional walk down the aisle, was wondering who the mysterious stranger was among. Victor's business associates and her small circle of family and friends, he was striking in a way that made people pause and take notice. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and eyes the color of stormy seas. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, the kind of understated elegance that spoke of serious wealth. But it wasn't his obvious prosperity that caught Sophia's attention. It was the way he carried himself, with a confidence that seemed unshakable, and something in his expression that looked like recognition. Pain, recognizing pain. The stranger moved down the aisle with quiet authority, his Italian leather shoes silent on the marble floor. The congregation held its collective breath as he approached, unsure of what was about to unfold. When he reached the altar, he stopped directly in front of Sophia, and she found herself looking up into eyes that held depths she couldn't fathom. "Give the interruption," he said, his voice carrying just a hint of an accent that she couldn't quite place. "But this lady deserves far better than public humiliation." Sophia stared at him, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Up close, she could see the expensive cut of his suit, the platinum watch at his wrist, the kind of quiet luxury that suggested more money than she could imagine. But it was his expression that held her attention. There's no pity there, no condescension. Instead, she saw something that looked like understanding, as if he knew exactly what it felt like to have your world crumble in front of an audience. "I'm Damien Cross," he said, extending his hand toward her, "and I have a proposition for you." A proposition. Sophia's voice came out as barely a whisper, her mind reeling from the surreal turn of events. "Marry me instead." Words hung in the air like a challenge, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. The cathedral erupted in gasps and murmurs, but Damien's gaze never wavered from Sophia's face. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the calm certainty that suggested he had thought this through completely. "You don't know me," Sophia managed to say, acutely aware that 300 pairs of eyes were watching this impossible scene unfold. "I know enough," Damien replied quietly. "I know you're strong. You've raised a beautiful daughter on your own. I know you're brave. You risked your heart again after losing your husband. And I know you deserve to walk out of here with dignity, not as a victim of someone else's cowardice." Sophia felt her breath catch. How could this stranger know about David? How could he know about the accident that had taken her husband and left her struggling to keep their small family afloat? Emma, who had been silent throughout this extraordinary exchange, suddenly tugged on Sophia's dress. When Sophia looked down, her daughter's dark eyes were fixed on Damien with startling intensity. "He's sad like us, Mama," Emma said quietly, her voice clearer than it had been in months. "But his eyes got happier when he looked at you." The observation. hit Sophia like a physical blow. Emma hadn't spoken this clearly since the accident, had barely spoken at all in recent weeks, and she was right. Something in this stranger's expression was shifting, darkness giving way to something that looked like hope. "Why?" Sophia asked, her voice stronger now despite the chaos swirling around them. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Damien's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the hushed cathedral, his words carried clearly. "Because 3 years ago, I lost my wife and unborn son in a car accident. I've been existing, not living. But when I saw you standing here, refusing to break despite everything, you reminded me what courage looks like. What love looks like." He paused, his gaze including Emma in its warmth. "I've been waiting my whole life to find my family. I think I just did." The words settled around Sophia like a warm blanket, offering comfort she hadn't felt in years. She thought of all the nights she had lain awake wondering if she and Emma would ever feel truly safe again. All the mornings she had forced herself out of bed to face another day of struggle, another day of being strong for her daughter when she felt anything but strong herself. This stranger was offering more than rescue. He was offering hope, a chance, at the kind of life she had stopped believing was possible. "Yes," she breathed, placing her trembling hand in his steady one. "Yes, I'll marry you." When their fingers interlocked, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. Not just hope for survival, but hope for something beautiful. As Damien lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, she realized this wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of everything she had stopped daring to dream about. The courthouse ceremony, 2 hours later, felt like something from a movie. Judge Morrison, a friend of Damien's family, performed the brief civil service that transformed Sophia Winters into Sophia Cross. The courthouse felt strangely intimate after the cathedral's chaos, with only a court clerk as witness and Emma standing between them, her small hand alternating between gripping Sophia's dress and touching Damien's jacket. When Judge Morrison asked for vows, Damien spoke with quiet conviction that made Sophia's heart race. "Sophia, I promise to protect you and Emma, to earn your trust every day, and to build something real and lasting from this moment of faith." Sophia's voice shook as she responded, "Damien, I promise to trust in this impossible leap to bring warmth back to your life and to help you build a home filled with hope and love." Their kiss was gentle, respectful, a promise rather than passion. But as their lips met, Sophia felt the last of her defenses crumble. Whatever this was, wherever it led, she was ready to find out. After the ceremony, Damien knelt to Emma's level, with a tenderness that made Sophia's throat tight with emotion. "Would it be all right if I hugged you? I'd very much like to hug my new daughter." Emma studied him with the intensity children reserve for the most important decisions. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck, whispering something only he could hear. Whatever she said made his eyes fill with tears, and when he looked at Sophia over Emma's head, she saw wonder and gratitude and something that looked very much like love beginning to bloom. The drive to Damien's home was quiet, except for Emma's occasional questions about the luxury car's features. Sophia studied this man she had just married, noting the careful way he drove, how he automatically adjusted the air conditioning when he noticed her shivering, the classical music he had chosen that seemed designed to soothe rather than impress. His house was breathtaking. A lakefront estate with manicured gardens and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning views of the water. But walking through the elegant rooms, Sophia sensed something missing. For all its beauty, the house felt lonely, like a museum of a life that had been lived, but was no longer being experienced. "Mrs. Chen, my housekeeper, has weekends off," Damien explained as he led them to a kitchen that belonged in a design magazine. "I hope you don't mind if I cook tonight. I find it relaxing." "Can I help?" Sophia asked, feeling somewhat out of place in the vast, perfectly appointed space. "Tell me about yourselves," Damien said, as he moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing what appeared to be grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. "I'd like to know who my wife is." The word wife sent an unexpected flutter through Sophia's chest. This was temporary, she reminded herself. It's an act of kindness from a wealthy stranger, nothing more. I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital, she said, settling Emma at the kitchen island with a coloring book that Damien had somehow produced from thin air. Or I was, until budget cuts reduced my hours. I've been picking up shifts at a clinic downtown, but it barely covers rent. She trailed off, realizing how pathetic her life sounded when spoken aloud to this man who clearly wanted for nothing. And Emma's father? Damien asked gently, not looking up from the stove. Car accident 2 years ago, Sophia said simply. Drunk. Driver ran a red light. David died instantly, but Emma was in the back seat. She saw everything. Damien's hand stilled for just a moment before he continued cooking. I'm sorry. Losing someone you love. There are no words adequate for that kind of pain. There was something in his voice that made Sophia look at him more closely. You sound like you speak from experience. He was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, as he plated their simple meal with the care of someone who understood that even ordinary moments could be acts of love, he spoke. My wife Isabella and our son Michael died 3 years ago. Complications during childbirth. I lost them both in the same moment. The words hung in the air like a prayer, like a confession, like a shared understanding of what it meant to have. Your heart ripped from your chest, and somehow keep breathing. Oh, Damien, Sophia whispered, her own pain suddenly feeling less isolating. I'm so sorry. Michael would have been almost Emma's age now, he continued, setting plates in front of each of them. When I saw you both today, standing there so brave and so broken, I saw what my family should have looked like. What I've been praying for without even realizing I was praying. As they ate their simple dinner in the enormous kitchen, something shifted in the space between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition, understanding. The beginning of something that might someday grow into the family they had all lost and desperately needed to find again. And when Emma fell asleep, curled up between them on the massive living room sofa, her head on Sophia's lap and her small hand clutching Damien's finger. Sophia allowed herself to believe for the first time in 2 years that maybe, just maybe, they were exactly where they were supposed to be. 6 weeks into their unconventional marriage, Sophia discovered that Damien had been quietly working with Emma on something extraordinary. She found them in the garden one Saturday morning, Emma giggling as Damien's hands moved in slow, deliberate gestures while he spoke in a language she had never heard him use before. They were practicing sign language, simple words like good morning and thank you, but Emma's face glowed with the excitement of learning something that felt special and secret. I learned this in college, Damien explained when Sophia joined them, his eyes warm with pride as he watched Emma practice the signs. My roommate was deaf, and I thought it might help Emma express herself when speaking feels too difficult. Was brilliant, really. Since the accident, Emma often struggled to find words for the emotions that felt too big for her small heart to carry. But with her hands, she could communicate without the vulnerability that speaking sometimes required. Will you teach me too? Sophia asked, and the smile that spread across Damien's face told her this had been his hope all along. Over the following weeks, their home filled with a new kind of conversation. Simple signs at first, please and thank you and I love you, but gradually expanding as Emma's confidence grew. She began expressing thoughts that had been locked away since the accident, her hands moving with increasing fluency to share dreams and fears she had been unable to voice. Sophia found the visual language surprisingly natural. Her medical training had given her good hand coordination, but more than that, signing required complete attention. When they communicated this way, they had to face each other, maintain eye contact, be fully present in a way that felt both intimate and healing. You're learning quickly, Damien signed to her one evening after Emma had gone to bed. They sat on opposite ends of the living room sofa, practicing their expanding vocabulary, while soft music played in the background. You're a patient teacher, Sophia signed back, marveling at how the movements were becoming second nature, how this silent language was bringing them closer together in unexpected ways. I want to tell you something, Damien continued, his expression growing serious as his hands moved with careful precision. Something I haven't said before. Sophia's pulse quickened, her hands hesitating in the air. What? I didn't marry you just to save you from embarrassment, he signed slowly, his storm gray eyes never leaving hers. I married you because when I saw you that day, refusing to break in front of everyone, staying strong for Emma, I recognized something I thought I'd lost forever. What? Sophia asked, though she wasn't sure she was ready for his answer. Hope, he replied simply, the sign graceful and definitive. For the first time since Isabella and Michael died, I looked at someone and thought, that woman could teach me how to live again. Sophia felt something shift in her chest, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fireplace. Crackling nearby? I'm still healing, she signed honestly, her movements trembling slightly with the weight of the admission. So am I, Damien replied, his hands steady and sure. But maybe we can heal together. Before Sophia could respond, they heard small footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her hands already moving in the fluid gestures that had become as natural as speech for her. I had a bad dream, she signed, her movements quick and urgent. Without hesitation, both adults opened their arms, and Emma ran to them, climbing onto the sofa between them as they held her close. Sophia became acutely aware of Damien's arm around them both, how naturally they fit together, like pieces of a puzzle that had finally found their proper places. What was your dream? Sophia signed, smoothing Emma's hair away from her face. Dreamed you and Papa Damien went away like Daddy did. Emma's hand shook slightly as she formed the words. I was alone again. Damien's arm tightened around them both, and when he signed his response, his movements were firm with conviction. But that will never happen. We're your family now, forever. Promise? Emma asked, looking between them with eyes that held too much. Knowledge of loss, for someone so young. This promise they signed together, their hands moving in perfect synchronization. As they sat in the lamplight, Emma gradually relaxing back toward sleep, Sophia realized they had become something she hadn't dared hope for. Not just a marriage of convenience, but a real family bound together by choice and growing love. The revelation hit her with startling clarity, somewhere between the sign language lessons and the quiet dinners and the way Damien remembered that. Emma liked her sandwiches cut into triangles. She had fallen in love with her husband. Not the desperate, clinging love born of gratitude, but something deeper and more real. The kind of love that grew slowly and took root in ordinary moments, becoming stronger with each shared day. A month later, Sophia discovered Damien's secret. She hadn't meant to follow him when he left the house every Thursday evening, claiming he had business meetings to attend. But the way he returned home each week told a story she couldn't ignore. Not physical exhaustion, but the emotional drain that came from giving pieces of your heart away. There were other signs. The distant smile at dinner afterward, how he would hug Emma longer on Thursday nights, as if she reminded him of something precious. The small notebook in his jacket pocket filled with careful observations written in his precise handwriting. When Mrs. Chen offered to stay late with Emma, teaching her to make traditional dumplings, Sophia made her choice. She would follow her husband and uncover whatever secret he was keeping. The drive downtown gave her too much time to think, each mile bringing fresh anxiety mixed with something that felt dangerously close to jealousy. Was he meeting someone? An old girlfriend connected to his late wife? The thought twisted her stomach. With an emotion she had no right to feel, she expected him to pull into some gleaming office building. Instead, he stopped at Children's Hospital, her former workplace, where she had spent years learning that healing sometimes required breaking your own heart repeatedly. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. When she saw him disappear through those familiar glass doors, canvas bag in hand, moving with the practiced familiarity of someone who made this journey regularly. 20 minutes later, she found herself on the 7th floor pediatric oncology ward, the place that housed the hospital's youngest and bravest fighters. What she discovered there stopped her heart completely. Damien sat in the center of the ward's common room, surrounded by children in wheelchairs and on portable force stands. Some were bald from chemotherapy, others wore colorful headscarves or baseball caps. In his hands was a worn copy of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, his deep voice bringing Narnia to life as a dozen young faces hung on every word. The scene was achingly beautiful. His powerful man who commanded boardrooms and made decisions sat cross-legged on a child-sized chair, completely absorbed in bringing magic to children who needed magic more than most. And then Aslan breathed on the statues Damien read, his voice dropping to a whisper that had every child leaning forward. And they came to life one by one, until the whole courtyard was filled with creatures who had been trapped in stone. Little boy, maybe 8 years old, thin and pale, but with blazing, intelligent eyes, raised his hand. Sophia could see the port in his chest where chemotherapy was administered, could recognize the particular exhaustion that came from fighting. Battles no child should face. Mr. Damien, do you think people can come back to life too? Not just in stories, but in real life? The question hung heavy with the child's profound grappling with mortality. Sophia held her breath, wondering how Damien would navigate such depths. He closed the book gently and looked at the boy with tender respect. No condescension, no deflection. I think, Oliver, that there are different kinds of coming back to life. Sometimes our bodies heal, sometimes our hearts heal, sometimes both. But the most important thing is never stopping belief in magic. The magic of hope, of love, of tomorrow, being better than today. Is that what happened to you? Asked a little girl with a bright purple headscarf, her voice soft but determined. Did you come back to life? Sophia watched Damien's careful composure give way to something raw and honest. His smile wasn't the polished expression from business functions, but something genuine and vulnerable. Yes, Luna, very recently I came back to life. A beautiful woman and her daughter reminded me that hearts can heal even when we think they're broken forever. Sophia pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from making a sound. He was talking about them, about her and Emma. Will you tell us about them? Oliver asked, echoed by eager voices throughout the room. Damien said, settling back as if he had all the time in the world. There once was a princess who was also a healer. She helped sick children get better, just like your doctors and nurses do here. And she had a little girl who was as brave as any knight, even though she had been through scary things. As Damien wove their story into a fairy tale, Sophia understood where he went every Thursday, what he did with his wealth and his carefully guarded heart. He loved these children, and they loved him back. She could see it in how they responded, not as a wealthy benefactor or important adult, but as someone who genuinely cared about their thoughts, feelings, and dreams. When the story session ended, and the children were helped back to their rooms, Sophia slipped away before being discovered. She couldn't escape what she had witnessed. This wasn't charity. This was courage. A man who had lost everything choosing to love children he might lose again. The drive home blurred with tears and revelation. She had thought she understood Damien, successful businessman, grieving widower, man seeking family to fill empty spaces. Tonight revealed layers she hadn't suspected. At home, she waited. When Damien arrived, looking tired but peaceful, she chose directness. I followed you tonight, she said as they settled on the back terrace, the lake stretching like a star-reflecting mirror before them. Damien went completely still, wine glass halfway to his lips. I see. Why didn't you tell me you read 2 children with cancer every Thursday? He set down his glass, hands clasping and unclasping. When he finally looked at her, his expression was vulnerable in a way she had never seen. 'Cause I didn't. Want you to think I was trying to impress you, he said finally. What I do there, it's selfish. Really? Selfish? Sophia couldn't hide her disbelief. How is spending Thursday evenings with sick children selfish? Those children face their mortality every day, Damien said, his voice rough with emotion. They know things most adults spend their whole lives avoiding. Somehow they still laugh, still dream, still believe in happy endings. Being with them reminds me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing hope despite the fear. He turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight, she could see tears tracking down his cheeks. After I lost Isabella and Michael, I stopped believing in happy endings. I thought my story was over at 35, that I would spend the rest of my life going through motions. Those kids taught me that every day you get to love someone is a gift, even if you might lose them. Sophia felt her breath catch at his raw honesty. Is that what you're doing with us? Living each day like it's a gift? Yes, he said simply, the word hanging between them like a vow. Oh, every morning I wake up and hear Emma laughing in the kitchen. Every evening when you fall asleep reading on the couch and I cover you with a blanket. Every moment when you look at me like I might be worthy of your trust. It's all a gift I never thought I'd receive again. Standing in the moonlight, listening to gentle water lapping the shore and distant sounds of Emma sleeping peacefully upstairs, Sophia felt something shift inside her. Not just gratitude or comfort, but something warmer, deeper, something that made her want to step closer instead of maintaining careful distance. What if the reasons we married weren't wrong? She whispered, moving toward him across the terrace. What if they were exactly right, just not in the way we thought? When she reached up to touch his face, Damien closed his eyes as if her touch was something he had yearned for but hadn't dared hope for. Sophia, he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. I used to think love was supposed to be safe and predictable and without risk, she said, her thumb tracing his cheekbone, marveling at how he leaned into her touch like a man starved for gentleness. But watching you with those children tonight, seeing how you love them despite knowing how fragile life is, maybe the best kind of love requires bravery. Maybe it requires choosing to love even when you know it might hurt. Are you feeling brave tonight? He asked softly, hands covering hers where they rested against his face. Sophia thought about everything that had led them here. The worst day of her life somehow becoming the first day of something beautiful. How Emma had bloomed under Damien's patient care. How her own heart had begun hoping again despite every reason to protect it. Yes, she whispered, I think I am. When Damien kissed her, really kissed her this time, Sophia kissed him back with all the hope she had been afraid to acknowledge. All the love she had been too scared to admit. All the dreams she had thought lost forever. This wasn't the desperate passion of people trying to forget pain, but something deeper. The careful, reverent love of people who had learned that every moment of happiness was precious. That every chance to love and be loved was a miracle not to be wasted. 3 months after their moonlight confession, Sophia woke on Christmas morning to find adoption papers under the tree. After months of legal proceedings, home visits, and court appearances, Damien had officially become Emma's father. It's final, Damien said, watching her read through tears that blurred her vision. As of yesterday, I am legally Emma's father. She's ours, Sophia. No one can ever question that again. Sophia looked up at him, remembering all the nights she had lain awake worrying about what would happen to Emma if something happened to her. All the fears about custody battles and social services, and the 1,000 ways a single mother's security could crumble in an instant. How? She whispered. I've been working with lawyers since October, Damien explained, reaching out to wipe away the tears that were now flowing freely down her cheeks. The process would normally take much longer, but when you have resources, and a little girl who is very clear about what she wants, bureaucracy tends to move faster. What I want is Papa Damien to be my real daddy forever, Emma announced matter-of-factly, climbing into Damien's lap with the easy confidence of a child who had never doubted her place in his heart. I told the judge that, and the nice lawyers. And everyone who asked, I told them Papa Damien loves me more than chocolate, and Mama says that's the most love there is. Damien's laugh was choked with tears as he held his daughter, his legal, official, permanent daughter, against his chest. More than chocolate? More than anything in the entire universe? He confirmed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of wrapping paper and delighted squeals. But Sophia found herself repeatedly drawn back to those adoption papers, to the official seal that made their family real in the eyes of the law. It wasn't that she had doubted Damien's commitment. He had proven his love for Emma in 1,000 ways over the past months. But having it formalized, having the legal protection that meant no one could ever question his right to be her father, filled a void she hadn't even fully acknowledged. Later that afternoon, after Emma had fallen asleep, surrounded by new art, supplies and books, and the elaborate dollhouse that Damien had somehow had custom-made to look exactly like their home, Sophia found him in his study, staring pensively out at the lake. "Thank you," she said simply, moving to stand beside his chair, "for giving her security, for giving us both security, for making her yours in every possible way." Damien turned in his chair to face her, reaching out to pull her down onto his lap. "Sophia, she was already mine.
Oh.
The papers just make it official. From the moment I saw her standing beside you at that altar, scared and trying to be brave for her mama, she was my daughter. Biology doesn't make a father. Choice does. Love does. Showing up every day does. Is that what your father taught you?" Sophia asked, settling more comfortably in his arms. "Oh," Damien said quietly. "That's what I learned by not having a father who understood those things. My father loved me, but he was always working, always building his empire, always convinced that providing financially was enough. He missed most of my childhood in pursuit of success." Was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her arm. "Swore that if I ever had children, I would be present for every moment I possibly could. I would know their dreams, their fears, their favorite foods and least favorite chores. I would be the kind of father who showed up." "Are that kind of father," Sophia said firmly.
Alice.
"Emma adores you. She lights up every time you walk into a room." "Because she's not afraid I'm going to disappear," Damien replied. "Because she knows that when I say I'll be there, I will be. That's the greatest gift you can give a child who has already lost so much. Absolute certainty that the people who love her aren't going anywhere." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes and clutching the new stuffed elephant that had quickly become her favorite gift. "Are you talking about me?" she asked, with a directness that never failed to make both adults smile. "We're talking about how much we love you," Sophia said, opening her arms so Emma could climb up and join their family cuddle. "I know," Emma said matter-of-factly, settling between them, with the contentment of a child who had never doubted her place in the world. "You tell me every day, and you show me too." "How do we show you?" Damien asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "Well, Mama always makes sure I eat vegetables even when I don't want to, because she wants me to be healthy. And Papa Damien reads me stories, even when he's tired from work, because he knows stories are important. And you both look at each other the way married people do in movies, like you're happy to be together." "Are we happy to be together?" Damien asked Sophia, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Very happy," Sophia confirmed, leaning over to kiss him softly while Emma giggled. "See," Emma said triumphantly. "You love each other, and you love me, and I love both of you, and that makes us a real family. The adoption papers just make it so other people know it too." The wisdom in her words took both adults by surprise. At 6 years old, Emma had somehow understood something that many adults struggled with: that families were built with love and commitment, not just biology and legal documents. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart," Damien said, holding both his girls close. "We're a real family, and nothing will ever change that." As they sat together in the comfortable quiet of the late afternoon, watching snow begin to fall outside the windows, Sophia reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in less than a year. This time last Christmas, she had been working a double shift at the hospital, leaving Emma with a babysitter she couldn't really afford, struggling to give her daughter even a small taste of holiday magic. Now, she was sitting in a room that looked like something from a fairy tale, with a man who loved them both unconditionally and a daughter who was finally truly secure. It wasn't just that their circumstances had improved, though they certainly had. It was that they had found something she had stopped believing in, the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. "What are you thinking about?" Damien asked softly, noticing her contemplative mood. "Last Christmas," Sophia replied honestly. "How different everything is. How different we are. Better different?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "So much better," Sophia confirmed. "I used to think that surviving was enough, that keeping Emma safe and fed and reasonably happy was the best I could hope for. I never imagined we could have this. A real home, a real family, the kind of love that makes everything else possible." "We're just getting started," Damien said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "This is our foundation, but we're going to build something incredible on it. Years and years of holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday afternoons that feel like gifts because we're sharing them together. Emma, who had been listening to their conversation with the focused attention she gave to all adult discussions that involved her future, suddenly sat up straighter.
Papa Damien,
She said seriously, "Will you still be my daddy when I'm grown?" Up. Even when I'm old like Mama. Hey, Sophia protested with mock indignation. I'm not old. Even when she's ancient like Mama, Damien corrected with a grin that earned him a playful swat from Sophia.
I'll be your daddy when you're 6 and 16 and 60.
I'll walk you down the aisle at your wedding and I'll teach your children how to ride bikes, and I'll probably still be trying to convince you to eat your vegetables when you're 40. Promise? Emma asked, holding out her pinky finger. Promise, Damien said solemnly, linking his finger with hers in the universal gesture of childhood vows, as Sophia watched her husband and daughter seal their promise with the gravity that children brought to such rituals. She felt a peace settle in her chest that she had never experienced before. This was what security felt like. Not just financial security, though that was certainly a relief, but emotional security. The bone-deep knowledge that the people you loved were committed to loving you back. Not just for now, but forever. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the garden where she and Damien had first learned sign language together, watching Emma chase butterflies while chattering excitedly about her upcoming art show at school. The little girl who had been silent for so long now filled their home with laughter and stories and endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether clouds got lonely. She's incredible, Damien said, coming up behind Sophia and wrapping his arms around her waist. Look how far she's come. We all have, Sophia replied, leaning back against his chest. A year ago, I never could have imagined this, any of this. What do you imagine now? Damien asked, his lips brushing against her ear in a way that still sent shivers down her spine. Sophia turned in his arms, looking up into the storm-gray eyes that had become her anchor, her home, her everything. I imagine growing old with you. I imagine watching Emma graduate and get married and have children of her own. I imagine Sunday. Morning pancakes and bedtime stories and all those ordinary beautiful moments that make up a life together. Just the three of us? Damien asked, and something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. Are you hoping for more? Asked, her heart beginning to race with a possibility she hadn't dared consider. I'm hoping for everything, Damien said simply. More children, more love, more of this beautiful chaos that you and Emma brought into my life. I'm hoping for the family I thought I'd lost forever, bigger and louder and messier than I ever dreamed possible. Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears, the kind that came with dreams finally being spoken aloud. I'd like that too, she whispered, all of it. When Damien kissed her, surrounded by the garden they had planted together, and the sound of their daughter's laughter floating on the summer breeze, Sophia knew that their story was far from over. They had started with a moment of crisis, a stranger's kindness, and a leap of faith. But they had built something real and lasting from those uncertain beginnings. Their love story hadn't begun with passion or romance in the traditional sense. It had begun with two broken people, choosing to heal together, choosing to trust again, choosing to believe that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. And as Emma ran toward them, her arms full of wildflowers, and her face glowing with pure joy, Sophia realized that she had finally found what she hadn't even known she was looking for. Not just safety or security, but a love so deep and true that it could transform three wounded souls into one unbreakably strong family. They were no longer strangers brought together by circumstance. They were a family of choice, bound together by love and commitment, and the miracle of a little girl who had found her voice again in the arms of the man who had become her father in every way that mattered. Together, whole and home at last.